All right, so my name is Ginger Grant. As you can tell from the accent, I'm from America. I'm from Arizona, which is one of those places that gets above 40 all the time and nobody dies, because it happens every year for 3 months. So I am a data platform MVP, and I wrote a book a year or two ago on cognitive services, and I'm also a certified trainer. If after this session you want to get a hold of me and I've gone back over to my side of the pond, Twitter's probably a good place to find me at Desert Isle SQL. All right. So one thing that's constant about data is everything is changing. That is the given, and especially, I'd say, in the past, 5 years. I was talking to somebody, and they said, how is what you do changed? I'm like, well, the product that I'm using wasn't in existence 5 years ago, so that does change. But really what you want to look at is keep your, if you remember nothing else, write this down and look at this regularly. Because it's just too hard to keep track of what's going on unless you look at this all the time. And they do have a really nice bulleted list. Or if you're a video person, you can just look at the video to see what they did. Because this is being updated all the time. And like I said, there are some really big updates that are not ready for release yet, so won't be talking about them. But they're going to be coming, and you're going to want to get more information about them when they are available. So, and in addition to everything that I'm talking about is pretty much something that was highlighted in these monthly updates. So they're really quite good, and I recommend checking this out all the time. All right, so one of the things that I wanted to bring up is really what kind of changes have been happening since Synapse. And one thing that I see is that the clients that I work with, they all think they need a database. And I've only given one of them a database. And the reason why is that there's no real reason, I think, in many scenarios to create a database when you can use serverless. There are scenarios, now the one client that wasn't the case for, they had a lot of data, and they had some executive people doing ad hoc querying, and they were rather impatient. But if that's not your scenario, I think that most of the time you can get away with not creating a database anymore. And that's, putting up a database in Azure and Azure SQL DB, probably minimum for performance is going to run you $1,200 US a month. So that's one thing that, and not that Synapse is free, I don't want to say that, but that's a savings of $1,200 you probably won't have to spend. And I highly recommend that you do what I tell my clients, and it was like, we'll put everything in a serverless database first and use that as our database. And if that's not good enough for you, hey, I'm always happy to spend your money. And but you don't necessarily need to do that. So, and not only is, this has gotten to be such a big deal. Obviously, Microsoft and that other company about bricks, they are going back and forth with each other on features and functionality. And guess what? This was such a big deal, they have it now. So this is an industry-changing thing, and it's not just Microsoft thinks it's cool. It's now they're being copied instead of the other way around, which will happen again too. The other thing that I see more and more is that more people are using code for ETL and moving away from using clicky-draggy options. And they still exist, and there's nothing wrong with them except they'll cost you more money and they're harder to debug. But you can't. But more and more people are using code to do it. And you saw this really a lot in a lot of the data pipelines. People are just writing a lot of SQL. Well, now they're writing Spark instead, and I'm seeing much of that. And there's also one thing that Synapse is doing, and also other tools as well, is there's more integration with other clouds. You can bring in data from AWS if you want to into Synapse. That's something that was added sometime in this last year. I don't remember when, but so there's more integration with that. And then the use of Parquet and Delta Lake is really exploding, especially with some of the improvements that have been made to Delta Lake, which is open source, unlike some of the other performance improvements that are out there. All right. So basically what I see is this is really where people are going with this, is they're looking for this data lake design process, and pretty much the curated is where you are going to be having your quote-unquote database. And even if you are deciding that you're going to load that up to the database, this is the kind of thing that I see happening. This is also a change from gold, silver, and bronze. Hey, I love jewelry, but I don't know that that has much of a place when we're talking about database design, because I know what gold is, I wear it, but curated is a little bit more descriptive in terms of what's going on. And I like blowing it out a little bit more just because it provides more context to the information that I'm saving. So this is another change. I mean, before it was all about the metals, and I see more doing something like this where the names mean things that you actually know and understand. So what's new? Architecting. So I don't know how many people realize this, but R is in public preview. So if you wish to, and it's funny, I remember when it first came out, they mentioned the fact that they were going to be adding R, and I heard that for about a year. And long and the short of it was there wasn't a big enough demand to make this a higher priority when they were doing it, is what I was told. I don't work for Microsoft, so take that with a grain of salt. But one of the things that I know about R was very widely used for people who have been doing data science for long periods of time. Because Python didn't get to be popular, and Scala is really still not that popular for doing anything with data science. Prior to 5 years ago, everything was in R. So you've got a whole bunch of people with a whole bunch of code, and they're like, yeah, that thing doesn't do R, I don't care. But one thing that is really important, I was actually doing this in Databricks where we were bringing stuff over from R because they wanted to be, in the cloud with doing their stuff, and we added. They had me in there because after they said it's not any faster. What's wrong? Well, what's wrong is I didn't write any of it in Spark. So if you just migrate your R code over, it's going to be exactly as fast as it was, because the only reason that it gets faster when you are using Spark is because you have the ability to use distributed clusters, and the only way that's going to work is if you write your R code using Spark R rather than just lift and shift from something you've been running before you were using Spark. So make sure that someone says, oh, cool, like move all my R code. Yeah, you're still going to have to rewrite it to be able to take advantage of R. So just keep that in mind if that's what your goal is. But I do see this as really being a feature that is going to get more people who've been doing data science involved with wanting to use Synapse because they can use a tool that they're familiar with. This is available now if you wanted to go. It's in preview, but if you wanted to go write code today, have at it. All right, improved Spark. So it's now on version 3.3. And one of the things that this is providing is an improved Delta Lake support. Interesting story about Delta Lake. So Databricks developed Delta Lake, and it was open source, but part of it was and part of it wasn't. Well, Snowflake called them on it, and they said that they were in violation of their open source license because they were in violation of their open source license, which meant that a lot of the features that used to be unique to you could only do this in Databricks, they had to put in open source. And so that's what is available now, because they fessed up. They didn't complain, but I'm sure they weren't happy that they got caught. So know now that what you see, if you read like the latest of what's going on at the Spark and AI conference, that when they talk about improvements to Delta Lake, that they're probably talking now about open source, and then we'll get them in Synapse relatively soon. The other thing that I've noticed is, and this is kudos to the Microsoft team that is now supporting supporting Synapse, because we're now getting updates a lot faster. I remember how long it took to get 3, and now they just seem to be happening a lot more quickly, and kudos to them to be able to do that. One of the other things that was added is the ability to execute notebooks with system-level security. This may not seem like a big deal, but it depends on where you're working, because where I work, they thought this was a huge deal because they wanted to do it with a system level account and it wasn't available. Now, also, one of the things that was added to improve Spark was it's got intelligent caching for connecting to the data lake. And this isn't something that you necessarily code for, but what this is it's a big-time performance improvement that you'll see when reading and writing to the data lake because of the caching logic that they're using internally is much smarter. So it's about 30% faster. And this was a couple months ago. The other thing, if you are bringing notebooks back and forth, now notebooks are completely compatible with IPython, which is open source standard. You know, Microsoft really pushing the open source mantra, which is kind of funny actually. But so all of these things have been added, and relatively recently. All right, Spark Advisor. Now this is really cool. It is kind of limited now, but this is one of those things that I'm sure will expand over time. And what this is doing is it's analyzing your notebook performance right now, so in line. So basically can tell you, hey, you know what, you probably wrote that wrong. And can provide you some guidance on resolving. So it's, again, kind of limited now, but here's some examples. Basically, it's telling you that if you write this, it's like, you know, this might not give you the results you're looking for. Seeing that you may get inconsistent results, and it'll just pop this message up for you, going, that's interesting. Maybe I'll take a look at that. So it's saying, you know, this is the kind of thing that's going to cause you a problem. The other thing is that this can tell you why something happened. So this is basically telling you that you have a runtime error. Make sure that you've got that you may not be having your Parquet may not be formatted correctly. So it's advising you of more useful information, which is something that if you look at the documentation, it doesn't do a ton yet. But again, this is kind of things that I imagine will be expanded soon, and this is a relatively new feature that was added as well. All right, so serverless improvements. So happy when we finally got Delta Lake tables. So now, again, because more and more people are using Delta Lake, for those of you who aren't that familiar with the technology, what Delta Lake provides for you is the ability to make your flat files perform more like a database because they do ACID level transactions. So, and you can also compress a whole bunch of little small files, which a lot of times you get when you're dealing with files, to make one larger file that has its faster I/O on that. And Delta Lake provides that as also something called time travel, which obviously somebody who's a Doctor Who fan, it's not time travel, it's just data logging. But it's really kind of cool that you have that ability with Delta Lake. So if you're just playing around with Parquet, you really should look into that. But they also added the merge command, which is useful when you're looking at T-SQL. To not be able to do something is really annoying. And there's also a couple of wider inclusion of some T-SQL commands. But to be honest, I have been writing T-SQL for a while, and a lot of the system stuff that I've tried to do is not there, but they are adding some more elements, which really is an improvement. All right, so this is like the random things that I know that have been added that I didn't figure out how a great place to put them. And KQuil is a data organization that's used when you have a lot of very large files that you want to query that you don't have time to do anything to except log the stuff that's deleted. A friend of mine worked for FedEx, and they use KQuil extensively because they're tracking, you know, millions and millions of records of data, and they only care about it for like a month. And after that, they don't care. So the inclusion of KQuil really brings a whole different type of data that people can use with Spark, because it's a really cool thing. The other thing that was added, again, I was so happy when this one happened, is an Azure SQL link. Because now you can link that in directly so that your Azure Synapse Workspace is more like a single pane of glass because you have everything within it. And then Azure Active Directory connectivity. So again, improvements on security. Of course, that is a bigger thing that more and more people are looking to do. All right, so in summary, these are kind of the highlights. R, I think, it can be a big deal. This, I worked for an insurance company, and they did so much stuff with R that they're not going to change because they're not going to get rid of the entire department. The improvements in Delta-like support, and really that's, thank you, Snowflake, because without that, I don't think that we'd be seeing not only the improvements that we have now, but we're going to be seeing more in the future because it's open source now, which is really cool. And Spark Advisor, although it's kind of nascent in what it can do now, I see that it's going. I see this as something that's going to be expanding over time for, giving hints as to how to improve your code. And let's face it, there are nights that we could all use that. So it's nice that that's happening. And I will say that more is coming soon. There are some really big things that I can't talk about because I'll lose my NDA, but if you have the ability within your organization to become a Synapse partner, now would be the time, because the changes that are coming will fundamentally change how you use Synapse. And its integration with other products. So definitely watch this space, watch this updates, and look for the changes because it will greatly change how you're able to integrate your data throughout your organization.